Well, welcome everybody to April's Happy Hour. So excited to have you here. I think we've all introduced ourselves and know each other. And so I guess I'm trying to think what's coming. The only big association news is we have our annual meeting coming up May 20th. So I hope everybody can attend. It's a Saturday at 5 p.m. Eastern. So for all of you guys in Central, that'd be 4 p.m. And we have elections coming up. So if you're a paid member of the association, keep an eye out for your ballot. It should arrive via email on May 15th. So, and we vote from May 15th through the 19th, and the results are announced at our annual meeting. And we also have, I don't know if, Marie, do you want to tell everybody about the photo contest, or?
I'm so sorry. I have my hand stuck in meatloaf. I'm making dinner.
Oh. That's too funny. Well,
I'm multitasking today.
Well, for the first time ever, oh, go ahead, Marie. I'm sorry.
No, you can totally do it. It's totally fine.
Hold on, I'm gonna. So we are holding the first annual photo contest, and the winners will get their photos put into our 2024 SCI calendar. That hold on a second. I got a message from Victoria. Give me a minute.
So Marie, is this going to be like the firefighters fundraiser calendar? So we're going to have our goats pose and kind of boudoir kind of style.
I would buy that calendar versus firefighter calendar, but
Marie also does roller derby, though. She's quite the
You're
spicy
kidding.
one.
Oh, we don't live in the cities, but we used to be big roller derby fans. Yeah.
Oh. No. So we're going to have different categories every day of the week, and we'll be announcing those this coming weekend. So everybody can enter. You can enter each of the categories each day. So we hope to see lots of great photos. Oh, and there's youth categories. So Erin and Marie's kids can get out their cameras and take their best photos of the goats.
Oh, that's human youth, not like goat youth.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Just clarify.
Every day there's a different category. So we have spring kids, SCIs in winter. I'm trying to think. We're doing International Heritage Week, SCIs with other heritage breeds. And I'm missing two categories off the top of my head.
Favorite.
And I know, I'm excited to see that. So what we get. And then in each category, we have 3 age classes. So there's adults, 18 and up, teens, 13 to 17, and then youth, which is 12 and under. So divided it up. So we should get some interesting photos, I think. And that's all the news I have for the association. Anybody else have anything? Okay. Well, I'm so excited to introduce George. He is going to talk tonight about kidding and kidding issues or questions people may have. So I'll hand it over to you, George. Welcome and thank you.
Thank you. So I don't have a planned agenda tonight. What I wanted to do was pick some folks' brains because I've got more questions than answers, and I know you're all the experts. So help me out here. As I think about kidding, we've been through that, and we've had good experiences. We've had bad experiences. We've done it at 22 below Fahrenheit. and that has its own challenges. And two of you on the call can, Wisconsin, Minnesota folks, you can relate to that. Virginia folks, I don't think can, but you've got your own challenges. So I'm interested in kind of a few different categories when I talk about kidding, and I'd love to hear some answers about. There's the general aspect of kidding, which we could all kind of read about in Goat Journal and so forth. But when we get into San Clemente, I think we should kind of ask is there anything specific to how do the San Clemente goats handle pregnancy and kidding different than other breeds? Because they were independent, they were on their own for generations. So are they handling it better? Are we finding that they need any type of, is there any special care in handling?
We have never had any issue. Let me say we started with traditional dairy goats originally. We had Nubians, La Manchas, and Saanens. And so we definitely cut our teeth on them. And our Saanen, we actually had to pull a kid. So I always recommend having a kid puller. Hopefully you'll never need it, because when you do and you don't have it, kids are freaking slippery. So getting a grip and pulling is really tough. And even after, we've never had to use our kid puller now that we have one. I mean, our SCIs have always been really easy kidders, and I also just want to say sort of unpredictable. I think traditional dairy goats seem to really give all these signs, like, okay, we're getting close, we're losing our ligaments, we've bagged up, we're going to be annoying, and you're going to know it. And a lot of times our San Clementes, I mean, we have an idea of when they're going to kid because we keep track, of their gestation and when they were bred. But, and otherwise they just as happy going quietly into a corner of the paddock and having their kids on pasture. And I like that a lot, that I can show up and the kids are dry and ready to go, and, I haven't had to worry about them. I will say this year there's been 2 cesareans on SCI that 2 breeders have had to give C-sections. And I always wonder, I was curious, just knowing the 2 breeders, they grain because of lack of pasture. And so I wonder if with SCIs, maybe that's something. It's like just too much grain created too big of a kid. We're 100% forage-fed operation, and so we just haven't seen kids so huge that a doe can't pass, get them out. Food for thought. No proof that my theory's right, but just, thought.
Very interesting. But you're you talk about being on pasture and stuff. So when do you kid? What months?
We try to kid, because we run a herd share. For our dairy, we try to kid almost the entire year. Nice. And so we try, but because it's Virginia and because of flies and fly strike, and we try to avoid July, like the last half of June to the first half of September. So basically 3 months in the middle of summer. Just because even when kids are healthy, it's hard for a mother to get them cleaned up fast enough to make sure we don't have issues with fly strike. And we're surrounded, we have 2 horse farms on either side of us, and then 2 doors down is a cattle farm. So flies are prevalent whether I like them or not.
Interesting. Others?
So we've had really good luck with we have mixes. We've had good luck. We haven't had any super tough. Oh, can you hear me?
I got you now. Yep. You have what kind of mixes?
So we have pygmy Nigerian mix, and we've had pretty good luck, except for one that we bred probably a little bit too early, because something that we've noticed is that the San Clementes take a lot longer to grow than our pygmy Nigerians. And so we've only had one rough kidding. But one thing that I've noticed is our goats are super friendly when they're about to give birth. Like, they want us there. One of them actually licked my daughter for like an hour before she gave birth and just wanted to sit there and literally lick her. And I've noticed other people talk about, like Erin, I think, mentioned that she has ones that will kind of bite at her and tell her to go away, not want to be around. So I've thought that's interesting, and we haven't experienced an SCI birth, but we're probably a ways away from doing that. But yeah, it's interesting because we've noticed that SCIs are just so much different than our other goats.
I expect an independence from the San Clementes, just because of their heritage.
Well, and I think a lot of them still have that feral nature in the background, which, obviously, on the island, they would have separated themselves. It's not like they had their own kidding stall. So they just separated themselves. And I think that's definitely something people need to think about. What traits are you encouraging? We have a brand new breeder in Pennsylvania who rescued a herd, and I'd purchased a buck out of the herd, so I'm familiar with them. I've been on site, and they were like, they were feral, so we wanted to raise them as feral. And let me tell you, they had feral goats. It took 4 grown adults to wrangle this buck into our vehicle, and that included somebody riding him like a pony.
I think I'd have passed on that.
Well, he was gorgeous, and once he got here, we were able to tame him. He's pretty amazing. But we took only 1 goat. This gentleman took, I think, 10. And so he's noticing all these weird behaviors. He's like, is this... And he has a grazing business, so he has a large herd of, other breeds. And he's like, is this standard for the goats? Like, they bite, they won't browse, they only, eat off the ground. And he's mentioning all this stuff. And I'm like, I've never seen a San Clemente like that. And then you stop to think about how they were raised. The hens were basically dirt. So they're
It's not just me, right? Okay.
Used to be.
Sarah, we're losing you. If you can hear me, we're losing you. We're losing you.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now?
We got you now, but we lost whatever you said there.
Oh, no. Well, basically, they've all these behaviors that aren't feral, that are just weird because that's how they were, raised. And so they don't browse because they only ever were given stuff off the ground. And I think that's something we need to think about, is that nobody wants a true feral goat, I don't think, or most people don't want a true feral goat. They want a goat that they can handle, but yet,
right.
You want to make sure they're still hardy and able to care for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So, welcome, Erin.
Erin, hey. You look like you're home.
No, I'm at an Airbnb.
Oh, okay.
I'm down in Bloomington, Illinois, just right down the road from the Miller Park Zoo.
Oh, exciting. How's that? How's the pickup? Is it pickup or drop off?
Both. I'm doing a trade. I have 2 of mine that I dropped off today, and then we're staying over tonight, and then tomorrow morning I'm picking up 4. So that'll be it. And I have my partner's I have my partner's van, so everybody's just chilling in the back and just going home. It's a good 7 or 8 hour drive back home, but we take the back road, so it's nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yay!
Anyways, awesome, yay! I can't wait to hear about everybody's kidding stories. So.
Yes, we're just getting them started. So I was asking I was asking really what the difference is. What's peculiar to the San Clemente versus other breeds?
I think I almost have had more experience with lambing than other breeds. Like I had dairy breeds before, and they were fine. They were mixed breeds. I don't recall birthing issues or birthing things. I remember a lot of flaky mothers, but I don't know. I help my friends out with lambing quite a bit, and there's a lot of like maternal or like mothering issues I found in lambing. Like a lot of mothers that don't care about the lambs, birthing issues, like weird this like stuff. So this made me think about like with an improved breed that's there to like grow meat or like do whatever, like what are you sacrificing in genetics? And I think I've heard that with like I don't know that many people that raise like purebred, like let's say Boer goats, but I know enough people that raise like mixed breed meat goats where they've been culling their herd specifically to be like hardy and good mothers. And so I don't know. I hear a lot of weird stuff with like breeds that have been bred for very specific things and maybe not for like a full gambit of things like birthing.
Well, actually, that's a great point, Erin, and that's actually something. When I was researching for an article on agrobiodiversity, they mentioned that came up a lot across breeds about how people are so focused on meat or dairy or fiber or whatever the trait is that they just these other traits they figure we can bottle feed or we can supplement, and so mothering skills or we're going to be on hand. So they let some of these other traits fall by the wayside. And I mean, these were like UN reports, so it's not just some little backwoods farmer noticing this. This seems to be like a worldwide issue.
Yeah, I should be a little bit more in the know sometimes with the bigger goat world. Besides just my little community observations, and I started listening to that podcast, Goat Gab, and it's more geared toward dairy goats. And even listening to like some of that, it seemed like a really weird year for kidding for people. This like the host talking about it and their experiences, but people that they know, there was just a lot of like kidding issues this year. And I hear that sometimes too, like there'll be good years or bad years or like buck heavy or female heavy. And I kind of almost wonder like sometimes as a whole, like if that stuff is being cataloged somewhere, like those numbers, if that's just like our observations, personal observations, or if that's just like a whole, like this year there were a bunch of boys born. It's just interesting, like I think about this, like how our world around us might influence things that we don't quite know about, or if that's even true, or all these little folk myth type of things too. So
I definitely think it's true. Just yesterday, I was talking to a fellow rabbit. We breed silver fox rabbits, and I was on the phone with my co-admin for our local club, and we were just talking. And of course, rabbits, you can breed every 4 weeks, so you have it's much easier to track these types of things. And this past fall, across the board, more people lost litters or does didn't take than we'd seen ever before. And it wasn't just like a single person, and it wasn't just like a new person. I mean, these were experienced breeders. And then, winter came and, the new year, and all of a sudden rabbits just started taking again, and those issues disappeared. It was very bizarre. We don't quite know if it was weather related or what, but it was definitely, at least here in the Mid-Atlantic, because we're the Mid-Atlantic Club, so I can't speak to the rest of the country, but it's definitely something we noticed, that there seems to be these bizarre cycles that somehow, outside forces.
Right. That's it. Like, I'll be like, the moon did something, or, something generic like that. But that's where I really like the idea of the sharing observations and information and being able to, like, catalog that somewhere, to look back on.
That would be great stuff to capture. Sarah, you were talking about databases, and it's a lot to enter, but man, that's really useful information. But it is, I think, very region specific. The data from, Aaron and Aaron, in Minnesota, Wisconsin area would be very useful for me. But frankly, your information probably wouldn't be.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Such a different climate.
Yeah. Which is something I would really like to hear. Marie, have you done kidding with San Clemente?
We have not. So my herd is super new. I've only had my goats a little over a year. Mm-hmm. So, and when I got my older herd, I call them so I've never owned goats prior to getting into San Clemente's. And when I got my what I call my original 3, my older breeders, to me, they were beyond feral. So when I had the transporter drop them off, when he drove out of my driveway, I cried. Because I don't know what I just did. So I had these giant goats to me. So I feel like a goober. So when my buck flew out of that trailer and peppered me with straw and everything out and came out of that trailer, he could have been as big as an elephant in my eyes. And he I'm not a little person, he dragged me across my barn. So I think I was a little reluctant in the beginning. And I didn't really have a plan yet. So I'm hoping quite a few of my does took. We're a little round, so I'm not sure if it's winter round or baby round quite yet. So, but I have yet to experience that. So I'm not there yet.
Marie, don't feel bad. One of my favorite stories to tell is about, because we brought home this feral buck, and we're unloading him from our SUV. And for those of you who don't know, I'm married to a Marine. And not just any Marine, he did security forces. So, I mean, he's a big, strong type of dude. And
he beats up Marines.
Yeah, and we unload this buck, and I'm already laughing just thinking about it. And here's Stephen. He ends up underneath this buck with his hands and legs wrapped around him, and the buck is just pulling him in circles, doing total donuts. Oh my God. And I know I should have been trying to help, but I couldn't. All I could do was laugh my ass off. It was the funniest thing.
You
I'm getting nasty looks right now telling this story. But oh my God. And this was out on our driveway, so of course neighbors are watching and stuff. I mean, it was, oh my God, it's, to this day, well, you can hear, I think it's the funniest thing ever. So yeah, there are some bucks like that, unfortunately, which is why it's important to handle your bucks.
Yes, and so from that experience, I probably will never, ever purchase a full-grown buck, ever. Although he is my best friend now, we have a few issues, but I feel like a goober because now he's super manageable and easy. My 12-year-old goes in there with him and gives him head scratches, and we don't have too many problems. But even my females in the beginning were scary. They weren't handled. Sorry, my toddler's being, yes, you can go get your bicycle. He's being bossy today. But all my younger goats, they're reluctant to hang out with you, but they will come up and see you. Just my original, they're all older, and I don't think they were handled much. So it was kind of intimidating, I guess. But I also jumped into a bigger herd when I had no experience either. So it wasn't the ideal thing. I'm glad I did, and I would do it again. But we have yet to experience babies. So.
That really brings up a follow-on question, maybe another session. It's not really kidding, but it's what happens in that first few months or year, when they're doelings and bucklings. And we handled ours, from birth, and we really tried to form those bonds. And it really is different when they're yours versus ones that you've inherited or purchased. And we just got a puppy, and purebred, and so we got it from the breeder, and really very intentional about, okay, how are we going to raise this thing, and what were its first 8 weeks like, and how do we raise this thing. And so much of what we started to learn then about puppy rearing, and I started to think, well, goats are very dog-like in a lot of ways. And how much of that applies, how much of what they've learned from raising puppies, because that's down to a science, it seems. There's a lot of information on that, a lot of research. How much of that can be applied to goats? And I think that's a completely separate conversation, but go ahead.
No, and I would agree with you. I was going to say the youngest goat I've ever gotten was a 2-month-old buckling, and he was a little wild and timid when he came, and now he likes to squeeze out of the gate and follow everybody around the yard. But even the other few that we got, I got one from Aaron, a couple from Miller Park Zoo when they were younger. They're all super friendly too. But I have 6 kids here, so they get loved on a whole lot more, probably than they should be. But yeah, I think they're a whole lot friendlier than from the other older ones. So I don't know if it makes a huge difference, but I definitely like the more friendly goat with kids. So
sure. And
I wanted to poke into really quick as well. There's something to think about too. I agree with the puppy thing. We just had a puppy experience for the last year and a half with his older brother that were raised the same way, same farm, same same parents, but different litters, but completely different animals, personality wise. And another thing I want to put out there is that goats are prey animals where dogs are predators, or I think I agree with you, there's routine and training, but there is always goats are oh my god, are you going to eat me? Maybe not as much the more domesticated breeds, but I think perhaps the San Clemente still have a lot more of that natural prey feeling in them, even though they weren't predated on except by humans on the island. But that's just something, again, going back to handling a lot more sheep in a sheep herd, 200 head, it's their mentality is so different. They are are you going to eat me? And if you have me, are you going to rip my guts out, kind of thing. And it's something the goats in my own herd. I have one female that's a little bit hard to catch and handle, but the full spectrum. I have 2 females that follow me around and are really annoying, and all the way up to the one female that I finally can maybe catch more nicely now. And I couldn't tell you why. Like, some of them are kids that I've raised, and some of them are like, you know, ones that I brought in from other farms. And it's just, I couldn't tell you like why this one follows me around or why this one likes head scratches, because this one came from a different farm, but this one was raised at my farm, but I didn't give it any different or more attention to another than I did to another baby goat in that same group, you know. There's so much like personality in these animals, and for the blanket, for the general of the herd, they definitely keep a distance. They're not like feral, but they're not running up to me and getting in my space either. They're just kind of like, hey, what's going on, keeping an eye out for me to make sure I'm not going to rip their throats out or something. And they're like, oh, but she has grain, she's cool. I'll talk to her. So it's such to me, it's almost like working with like a more hands-off flock of sheep. You can handle them, but they're not like a mini Nubian either. And so they're in the in-betweeny world. So.
Yeah, we notice even in twins, we'll notice significant personality differences. And we're doing a lot of myotonic, so that wherever they are on the myotonic spectrum, that really determines how much fight or flight they have. So the ones that are very low myotonic, they're not phased. They'll come up, and the others are running, and they're coming toward you. So yeah, it's all kinds of stuff. But back to kidding, and Sarah, you're fairly warm weather. You talk about kidding in the summertime. Now, when we first started getting goats, our first herd that we purchased, you know, we had like 3 goats, and then we purchased 15. So we went from small to like, okay, we got a herd now. And we got them like December 15th, and they started kidding the week after. And so we were like, hello, we're kidding now. No kidding. And it was, you know, dead of winter in Minnesota, you know, and so we had deliveries below 10. We had a couple kid below 20 Fahrenheit, and we had losses. Not many, surprisingly few, but we did have losses with that. So Minnesota, Wisconsin folks, when are you kidding? How much do you really try to control that? And how do you deal with cold weather kidding if you do that?
I'll hop in and say that every year is different for me, depending on like some management plans and goals. I've totally had, it wasn't me, it was somebody else that had goat spread, and so they were popping babies in January and February, and it's a lot more work to get things set up for cold weather. So like, you want to think about, why would you want to have kids coming that early? Are you part of this meat market? Are you, because I know of like dairy and meat people that are like, yeah, I'm going to have kids during this time because I'm going to hit these ethical holidays and stuff like that, or ethic holidays. And that's why people kid certain times of year. The same with like milk production. So the San Clementes, I have evolved over the years of like, sometimes like I'm just like, man, I'm sick of these does screaming and being in heat. Fine, I'll deal with it later. But my management is to be like, I want these goats to be as little, like, I don't want to have to baby them. And so next year I want to start kidding in like mid-April. What month? Sorry, I'm in this time period of my life where I don't know what month it is. Not April, but May. I think it's March. I want to kid in May, and be hands off. I want them to kid on pasture. I'm getting a solo pasture kind of ready for that so they can have like cool like windbreaks and stuff like that. Not that they would need it, but like I don't want to sit there and like baby mothers because they need extra like heat or like the kids, you know, like this last kidding season it was unseasonably cold. So every mother, like I was doing nighttime checks and checking on the goats like every hour or two or for like a week. And that sucks. Like it sucks after a while. Then I bring kids in, warm them up, take them back out. It's fine. I can do it, but also like why? Why am I making myself work more? It's just for stress on the goats, you know, it's for stress on the kids. And so I am really shooting for like that mid-May, late May kidding. Makes it easier on everybody. But I think in the past I've kidded early because I needed milk too. So heads the thing open. Anyways, so that's where I'm at. I want to make these goats like as hands off as possible for me and make.
I was going to say, the one thing I've noticed just by talking to and watching breeders is that Erin always seems to have success because she's always prepared. So even if, you know, she kids on the coldest day of the year, she's always prepared for that, and she has the backup plan, where we've had some other breeders who, you know, have had oops babies in the middle of the coldest weather, and they haven't been successful. But the next year, when they did have babies in the next, you know, they had the heating barrels, you know, the upside down barrels with the heat lamps. They had you know, a box of old rags ready to go to make sure everybody got as dry as quick as possible, a hair dryer or a heating blanket, and coats. I guess they're technically sheep coats that they can put on their kids to make sure they stay warm, but yet they breathe so they don't get like sweaty and get pneumonia. And I think, you know, just always, even if your plan is May, just always make sure you have this backup that, you know, and you have supplies so that way you're ready to go and it's not this panic attack like you're trying to gather it and stuff like that. I think, like, I always think of it, at least here in Virginia, because we don't have to deal with that type of stuff usually, like a feeding tube for kids. The first time we needed a feeding tube, it was like panic because I didn't have one. And then the few other times we've needed it or wanted it, it wasn't such a big deal because we already had it on hand because we were prepared. So I definitely think being prepared, you know, for these types of situations that you don't want to ever have to deal with, helps.
And that brings up a good question of what is prepared for different, and this is where it breaks down regionally, because Sarah, your preparation is going to be completely different, even during warm weather months, from ours, most likely.
Definitely. I think that, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Marie.
No, sorry. I was going to say, I think there's like basic level prepared. And then there's, you know, I live in Wisconsin and I get goats at Christmas time, and this goat is huge. Another goat that went another place, you know, had babies and we didn't know. I panicked a little bit when I got my herd. And Erin and Laurel couldn't have saved me anymore because I didn't know what I was doing. And my one doe was huge. She's just short and wide like I am. So I was very thankful she didn't have babies on board. But I think new breeders should always cling on to an experienced breeder and have a great mentor. So I couldn't have been any more thankful, like I said, for Laurel and Erin at the time, because they threw any and all information at me. So I had everything. And I was playing with a saw, drilling holes in a barrel that I had to make a heat barrel just in case. So I think it's important that we stick together, which everybody seems to be super helpful. So that new breeders have what they need to. So I think my level of preparedness depends on just general when you have animals versus more specific things, I guess.
Great advice. I was going to say something else I've seen and learned over the years is document, document, document. It doesn't matter how silly or insignificant it may seem, because down the road you may start to see patterns, and be willing to change your points of view. We're a pretty chemical-free farm, but we notice that some years we really have issues with the potential of pneumonia or the start of pneumonia, just because we get such huge weather swings here. In March, we were having 90-degree days, and then the next day we'd have a freeze. And, that's just tough on, kids. And so, we've been playing around with the pneumonia vaccine. Do we give it? Which goats do we give it to? And so we've been more looking at does that are going to stay as part of our breeding program, because they're essential to get through, and where meat goats that we know are going to end up butchered, we haven't really worried about it. But I think sort of coming to that realization that it's okay to change, it's okay to learn. You don't have to sort of stand on this hill and take your fall.
I agree with that so much too. I think too, on Marie's part, also being a receptive person when people have suggestions is also important, or being open-minded when people do suggest things as well. And the same too, Sarah, like over the years, like I was really, with Wisconsin springs we had 80 degrees, and then it was just like 15 degrees. And that's hard on kids. And so I've got my eye open. Like I've had pneumonia issues, not last year, but the year before especially. And just kind of keeping my eye open for that and talking to my vet a little bit more, but also getting a lot of different opinions from other people about these things. And yeah, I'd rather have just I'd rather give like one inoculation and not worry about it, rather than like start giving antibiotics all over the place, But being prepared, I think, is just something that's ever evolving. Like what I bought initially for my goats has turned into like a library shelf full of medical supplies, and also have to do with like where I live. And it's hard for me to just go somewhere and buy something. It's usually a good 45-minute jaunt somewhere to like hope I can get the thing that I might need. And so this I don't hoard things, but I definitely have one of everything at least that I think I might need.
Yep.
Yeah.
And hearing Marie's story and the importance of having mentors, and I'll add to that the importance of avoiding Facebook groups. And I scan those every once in a while, because I was kind of given the advice of, there's everything you want to know is on Facebook, and it's so horrid. It's there's so much disinformation on there, and I think that's where the value of a group like this, who are experienced breeders and reputable breeders, or at least want to be, like myself, it's important to be able to understand where that information is coming from, and whether it's regionally valid, whether it's appropriate to the breed, and so forth, and scientifically accurate. Is this going to work?
There's somebody I would suggest that people follow is Sherry Nolden, that lives in Wisconsin. And she's also a veterinarian, but she runs a she's got Norwegian fjord horses, which are this like my dream horse. If I don't want horses, but I'd love them. And she breeds them, but then she runs like meat goats and sheep. And she's one of those people that have culled her herds so hard that she's super hands off with her goats and sheep. It's just like she doesn't do any extra supplementation during gestation or lactation or birthing. She's just like, they get grassy hay, they get she's just like, if they get parasites and I have to deworm them more than once, they go to auction. So it's just like she has now developed her own like mixed breed herd of these animals that are pretty self-reliant, and that is an interesting approach too. She's just like, they'll kid, I don't have to do anything, but also like her observations and then the papers she writes is really cool to read because it is just like coming from, like, I've never heard her speak, but I can think about her voice in my head, this very like matter of fact, like this is what this thing is kind of thing. And so I would really highly recommend people that I think she's a pretty public figure and really good at getting back to people if you have questions.
Can you put that name are you able to put it in the chat maybe?
Yeah.
So George, you asked about when we try and breed. We've had born anywhere from early December all the way through our latest kidding was, in like March. And I would prefer to be after all of those every single time. This year we had an oopsie baby, which we actually ended up losing a goat over the winter. Don't know what happened with him. The vet said, just sometimes things like that happen because he was healthy, and I just happened to catch it on a video too. And we ended up having maybe his niece actually is how you consider him, her just like a week later. So that was easier on my kid. But we've had babies when it's 25, 30 below outside. Haven't lost one yet, but we haven't had any kiddings at our house. But we're very fortunate. We have an old horse barn that somebody had. It's a 6-stall horse barn. So we can separate out the goats. They all have it. It's all insulated. So typically it's above 20 degrees. So we're set up to have a cushy life for them.
Nice. Our barn's uninsulated, so when our Nigerian dwarf dropped at 22 below, she took up residence in our bathroom.
Yeah. Well, we actually have an option in our barn because it was used as a boarded horses, so we keep them off at 45 degrees. So if we have to get warm, we go right in there. That's where our cat lives in the winter. We just have a small space heater, and we're very fortunate to have what we have. But I was trying to remember how many kids, because we've actually taken goats in from other people and had them born on our farm, so that because they were too new and weren't sure what to do. So we've had good success, but it's that whole prepared, and I put that all on Jenny because she's the one who's good about making sure everything's there. So
awesome.
That's our success. Her prepared, and she's actually out to dinner with some friends. Long overdue.
Good. I'm curious. So much of timing the kidding is the timing of the exposure and knowing when to expose. We have our paddocks. We have the frat house and we have the sorority house, and they're separated by a electrified fence, but they share a Ritchie water, or two-sided Ritchie water. And so we're watching the behavior because, the boys, they're just not, they don't give up. They can tell. And so we're watching that behavior at the water cooler. So how's everybody else doing that? What are your telltales? When do you know to expose? How do you expose? How long do you expose?
I think I sent you an email about this because I had enough does that didn't take. I was a little bit
Yeah.
I have to reflect on that a bit. And I think there was I think this is sometimes too, it's again, I have all this stuff written down and I'll look over it, but it's I also think about why I might breed a little bit early too, is because if it starts snowing out, I have different breeding groups, right? And sometimes if there's enough snow, gates and fences don't work the way that they really should. And that's actually something I'm doing this summer is kind of I'm reestablishing gates because I was so angry this winter. We got a lot of snow this winter and a lot of whatever. But anyways, I have seen with my girls is that they are intensely vocal, and they show signs of heat. It's really easy to establish when that starts happening and ramping up. And my boys just don't. They're okay, but they're not reacting as heavily as the girls do. I have more issues with the girls trying to break out and jump fences than the boys don't. They're okay. And so once I start seeing these heat cycles, and I'll put it down on my calendar and kind of write down who I visibly saw, and maybe there's some other ones I visibly saw 2 weeks later after that, and I'll see if they'll start cycling up together kind of thing. And then I just choose my breeding time, which is usually late October, but I'll be pushing that to a later date this year. But I established my breeding groups, and so what happened this last breeding time was that I picked boys for these groups. I think I had 4 different groups, and some of the females were violently not happy with my choices. They were PO'd. I had to grab the buck out of there because the females were I thought there was going to be damage done. And I was sorry, I picked the wrong fella for you. Thankfully, because I'm trying to do some line breeding and stuff too. And so thankfully I had this some backups and some switcheroos, and some of them that it didn't matter who they really got bred to. And I finally reestablished a cut down. I think I only had 2 breeding groups because there were some females were just not happy. And so I have these breeding groups, and I try to keep them as far apart as possible because there is that issue too. If maybe I have a younger, less experienced buck, there was a whole thing I remember hearing about on, I think it was the Thrifty Homesteader, they get shy and they can't breed because there's maybe a more mature buck somewhere else, and they get they're I can't compare to that. It's kind of it's a really interesting thing where it's just they're intimidated by the females and they don't know what to do. So those are some things that I've dealt with, not just this last breeding season, but I've kind of noticed some of this over the years too, or some older bucks just don't care, or they've lost their vigor or whatever. But that's what I do, and I just make sure all these breeding groups have proper nutrition and the minerals and water and everything too. But then I think what I really screwed up on this last breeding season was not keeping bucks in long enough. And I think that really had to do again with some winter weather stuff and me needing to move animals away. I should have kept the bucks in for another cycle or even longer than that. So yeah.
So we tried a couple of different, our initial take, and we this was where we got a 0% on our initial, and that was, we put the buck in the pasture late fall, thinking, oh, we're going to catch a cycle. So we left him in there a month and a half, almost 2 months, and got nothing out of that. And we realized it's just too early. We weren't watching the signs of the females. And so what we have shifted to, and we still don't, we won't know for a month or two, but we watch that behavior and then we expose for a couple of days. So we would know exactly, if when they're going to drop. So we could time that a little better. I don't know if that's going to work or not. So we may come out 0 again. I don't know. But so you're leaving them in there for, you said, a cycle or two.
Yeah, like I think I pulled the bucks out. I would have to look back at my calendar, but I think I might have only had my bucks in there for like 2 weeks. And usually I'll leave them in for like, in the past I've left them in for like 2 months, I think. And kind of have like, it's a big window, but it's again, like I have to look back at my notes as to why I make the decisions that I do at the time. And I think sometimes too, I'm just like, why can't everybody just get pregnant together so you kid together? So I really get like annoyed by these drawn out kiddings that happen too. I'm just like, oh, I'm getting sick of this. But this is again where I want to move to like a warmer season for kidding, so it doesn't matter if they're dropping 1 a week or whatever it might be. I can be more hands off with them then. Weird noises in the house.
Not your house.
I know, it's haunted, I'm sure. But yeah, it was like the does that I saw that didn't get bred were a lot of it would be the first time fresheners. And one doe that I don't think will ever get bred anyways. And then I was confused about another doe why she didn't get bred. She should have, but.
I'm curious if how this feels so much like a birds and bees kind of question, but how do you know they're pregnant?
Oh, like if I haven't done blood tests, but I have done urine tests in the past. And maybe that's something I would need to step up my game on, is just like doing pregnancy tests with blood, because that's really like the only real sure way you know until they get later in their gestation usually. But actually, it's kind of funny. This is just a little hilarity on my part, but I lost a lot of goat groups you were talking about on Facebook, because everybody is taking a picture of their goat's rear end and being like, is she pregnant? Like, I was like, it would be like I'd bop on Facebook and just scroll down as all these goats rear end. And I was like, my partner Bob was like, what are you looking at? I'm like, yeah, I should leave this. You can kind of tell, like the does that I brought into the Miller Park Zoo, the first due date is May 5th, and you can see like, what is it called, springing in cows, like where the vulva and the whole area gets like, plushy or whatever you want to call it. But like some does don't show a whole lot, some do more. I don't know. But that's the only sure way to tell. It's like a blood test or maybe a urine test.
Yeah, and those are so late. The when you see those physical signs, and you have the bag letting down, and you can see some tells like that. But those are very late.
A friend of mine here, she actually got her own ultrasound machine. It has, yes. Oh my God!
Someday.
And she does ultrasound on all of her sheep and goats to tell, one, did they take, and two, how many kids or lambs are they going to give? That's definitely on my wish list. I'm totally jealous. She showed, she always is, sharing ultrasound photos every season of, all of her goats and sheep, and I just drew. That's sad. That's sad. You sit here and you're drooling over an ultrasound photo. But it's like, oh, this one's going to have twins, or this one's having triplets. You're like, I need that.
Yeah, an ultrasound's definitely on our list someday, and I haven't looked into it, but I just wonder if there are maybe grants that could cover things like that, especially for threatened breeds.
That's an interesting idea. I never would have thought to look like that. We, in some of our pens, if it's goats that we have to be sure have been bred, we've used marking harnesses just to make sure that you can tell, and that's a pretty low-tech, easy way to know at least the buck has tried. And usually a pretty good success rate with that, especially if you go over 2 cycles and see, did he try to breed again or not.
Well, we're pervy. We put them in a stall and we watch. So.
I'm watching too, but I have one of those marking harnesses that's been sitting around, so I can try it out.
Exactly. Try to think if there's anything else. I have to check my notes. I was writing notes this afternoon of things. I was like, oh, make sure we talk about this, or I mentioned this. Oh, I know what to mention, too. So, as I said earlier, we had this meeting today with this reproduction firm, and we were talking about a specific SCI who the past 2 years has basically sort of aborted or kidded early, and when all was said and done, just didn't give viable kids. But she had all the years prior to these 2 years. And so, the group is talking, and they're like, oh, well, first we should have her, the doe, go through the vet and make sure there's no health issues. And then suddenly it occurred to me that this particular doe, for all the years she successfully kidded, had lived in Virginia. And 2 years ago, they moved to New York, where she started having kidding problems. And so suddenly I'm like, well, is there something in the pasture, something in the hay? And all of a sudden, everybody was like, well, first, the experts didn't know the goat had moved. And then, all the other SCI breeders are like, oh, that's really good, and it comes back to this documentation. Like, sometimes management is the issue. It's not the goat, per se, I mean, granted, we don't know if that's the solution since we just thought of it today, but hopefully that is the problem, and maybe, she's been eating something that she shouldn't be, and that's causing the issue or something like that. I know when we moved to our new farm, we had azaleas, and before we could get stuff fenced off, the goats got into azaleas, and we had a round of abortions because azaleas are
vomiting and scours.
Yeah, vomiting and scours, and it was just we didn't lose any adult goats, but it was a mess. The azaleas are gone, but
Papa ripped them out.
So anyway.
I think this is getting a bit off the kidding, but still related to kidding thing too, is like I have noticed, I've brought in enough different adult San Clemente goats from different places, and I couldn't tell you why. Some adapt better than others, and some I have to I don't even want to say baby along, but I have to do more care with them than others. But it is definitely the offspring that are born on my farm seem to have generally inherited this already. They're like, oh, this is the place where I'm going to live, and they already have these an immune system for my farm kind of thing. And I think about that too with people were talking about drinking raw cow milk and how they feel like it's safer to drink it from your own barn than from somewhere else, just because it has all of these bacteria that you're used to already in it, type of thing. Mm-hmm. Whatever that theory is, but yeah, there is this something I definitely have does that I treasure so much because their kids are just amazing offspring, and I really get to be hands off with them. But I don't know how that would translate to if they got. Well, we'll see how these 2 does do at the Miller Park Zoo. I'm sure they're going to be fine. But how they translate to other people's farms that are outside of my region, and I don't know that yet. And that's something like I was talking to Sarah about this, but bringing in those goats from Miller Park Zoo, specifically the ones that have been there for 5 or 6 years, that have had all of the vet stuff and all of the coddling. I was talking about how I can thoughtfully introduce them into my herd and, you know, get their immune systems just kind of used to my place after they've been, you know, dewormed God knows how many times. You know, I'll have to look back at their vet papers, but it's a novel of vet papers. But we'll see. I mean, it's all for the line breeding and stuff. And I'll do whatever it takes. But yeah, I really appreciate like those kids that are born at my farm, and I don't really have to do much with them.
Well, that's the thing, is that first generation is adapted. It adapts, and animals adapt very quickly. But that second generation is native.
Yeah.
It comes in, it knows where it is, and it adapts quickly. And you know, Sarah does rabbits, so you know that happens very quickly. And for goats, it's 12 months or more. We're just on we're so much longer time cycle to see that happen. I don't know about you, but I'm impatient.
I am. I've learned patience the last handful of years. Like, I've learned so much patience. I've become better about it. And that was like that podcast again, that Goat Gab podcast, where they were talking about line breeding these Toggenburgs. And I think about this, like, this guy that's maybe in his mid-20s, I am not going to say what he is exactly, but he's, you know, he has like degrees in animal science and stuff like that, so he's very knowledgeable, but he's been like breeding and showing Toggenburgs because it's a family thing. So it's something he's like inherited and worked on and developed. Or is it Toggenburg or Oberhausen? I think it's Oberhausen, excuse me. But he has this like, he is now known for this really amazing Oberhausen, or improving it as a milk breed, because that was also like a critically endangered goat breed at one point too. And you know, and I'm just like, God, he's been working on that since he was 9. You know, and it's like, I think about my own mortality, and I'm like, where will we be at when I'm like 65 or 70 with the San Clemente goats? Like, you know, and that's where I get impatient a little bit. Like, I want to see more, but we can't push those animals anymore. You know, they're doing what they can. So, yeah.
But it makes every exposure and every kidding really, really important. And that was the frustration for me this season, missing the first round. And it's like, I'm hoping I've got another chance. We tried a second exposure, but man, if we miss this year, you know, if we don't, that's rough.
Complete bummer. Like, oh. Yeah, like you have to wait a full another year. I was started this off on a different tangent when I was talking with a friend who was talking about another family dairy farm down the road from her. Whatever's going on with their management, it's not great. But they had like a calf group born. There's about 15 calves that were born, and due to probably this like apathy for caring about those calves, all of them except for 2 died, like over the course of like 9 months, 6 months, and I'm like, that's your like backup there. Like, that's why you can't be apathetic about like your goat, or like not just goat, but your animal management. Like, you just kind of are like, oh, I'll give it a shot and see what happens.
That's your income.
Yeah.
That's your livelihood.
I was like, doesn't that, you know, going on, like, I'm like, how does that not impact this family farm, because they lost so many, like, it's not just that instance, and they're like, oh, they actually don't own the farm, it's the parents, so they're...
Oh, we lost Aaron.
That doesn't, like, you know, give you an excuse to, like, you know, ignore your animals, but like they just didn't care, and I'm just like, that's horrible. Like, and it is just like, yeah, like, man, when you miss an opportunity, you missed it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
mind-boggling. Sorry.
No, we've started keeping really meticulous. We're using, I don't know if this is yet another conversation, what are people using to document? And I started using FarmOS, and so if we observe something, if we, Johnny is hanging out by the Ritchie and vocalizing, it's we make a note of that, and so we try to actually track what we're seeing and what patterns there might be to that. So just so we can, because we've got to learn, we've got to be on top of it.
I think a lot of people underestimate the importance of documentation. They really, I'm looking up the program. I was not familiar with it.
FarmOS.
Yeah.
It's pretty. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it, and I'm excited about it. But it feels like you got to be a techie developer kind of to use it. It's very clunky, very old school open source. But it has all the taxonomies built into the database, and it's extensible. So very excited about what it can do.
Interesting. I'll have to check it out.
I'm happy to give you a tour sometime, as clunky as it might be.
I was going to say, we just use Google Drive and mainly their spreadsheets, so that way we have a cloud system. So no matter who's doing what and where, they can access it, and we know the records are there.
Yep.
But it definitely takes organization to make sure you have it organized and in the right way, and all the notes. Yeah. And I'm learning, the thing I was learning today, which is like the people, the genetic firm today was talking about how a lot of goat people don't keep records. That they're working with a lot of international clients that were trying to find information, like, so they could bring, import goats to their area to help improve their local stock. And, like, for example, the Boer Goat Association had, the largest meat goat association in our country, and they didn't have any of the information they needed. And I found that interesting. And part of why I made note of it, because I think we have a really great opportunity. We're sort of still at the beginning to make sure we keep track of, like, they don't even have birth weights, she said, a lot of people. And I was like, what? I mean, what do you mean they don't have birth weights? I don't
have birth weights.
Oh.
For my kidding last year, we didn't have the wherewithal, we didn't have the presence of mind to take birth weights. We didn't do it.
So, well, it's definitely not something I did at the beginning.
Keep them from freezing to death.
Well, that's true. Yeah. We use a reusable shopping bag and a fish scale. You throw the kid in the bag, you hang the bag, you get your weight. Okay.
We've got that set up now.
It is the easiest. I mean, we just found it so easy. Like, because some people are like, oh, they get off the scale and they're trying to put a kid on top of a scale. Like, no. Nope. Throw the kid in the bag. It will survive for a minute. But yeah, you would think, I mean, so many of these people, are trying to sell goats on a sort of a commercial level, and they're not taking any of this stuff. And I mean, obviously we're all learning still and getting better at it, but I'm excited that we can start at the ground level and build databases and information.
Yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you're hearing from those folks as to what data we need, how's it recorded, what formats are they using. Scrapies at a small scale I can't afford to be sacrificing a goat every year to meet the scabies requirements. So how do we do that if we're going to export?
Exactly. And they were going to, I should within the next few days have all that information sent to me, because we had a lot of questions for them, and they were compiling long lists of the types of information they're going to send us. And one is all the information, but they are, they're like USDA approved, and so they do all the testing if you're exporting a live goat, you send it to their facility and they do all the testing and everything. And as I said, she's trying to work with the USDA and this Neogen. They're the genetics lab we're looking at switching to. Mm-hmm. They are using what's called SNP technology. So just to give you an idea, UC Davis, the technology they use, microsatellites, they look at, off the top of my head, I want to say it's 16 markers. It might be 14. That's all they test for. This SNP, like when they run their markers for a goat, 150. So a slight, not just a slight difference, a large difference. And so basically they have developed all these tests for the cattle industry, and genetic markers. And so now they're interested in moving into goats. And that's sort of, I'm being put in touch with the geneticist who is going to start doing all of that marker testing, and they're currently working with the Boer Goat Association, but Smart Reproduction, which is the name of the firm in Jonesboro, Arkansas, thinks that we can convince Neogen to also work with San Clemente's because they're so unique. And so we'll be on the ground floor of all this brand new testing for the goat industry, hopefully, fingers crossed. And Yay. As I said, yeah, and the goal is that you will no longer have to kill a goat to find out if it has scabies, or even if it has tendencies for scabies. They really hope to be able to nail down the genetics of it and be able to test for it. So,
well, I tell you, if we could combine like CAE, CL, Peonies, Scrapies, just do that all in a manual test. That would be pretty amazing.
Exactly. So I'm still trying to wrap my mind around this meeting today. It was so mind-blowing. Like, we were talking about cloning goats that they can store, like, basically they send you a vial. Well, no. Just, we of course were talking to them about storing embryos in semen straws. And they're like, well, if currently that's out of the cost for somebody, they can just as easily, a person can take this little snippet from a goat's ear, put it in the vial, and store that. And that's like exactly. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah, but.
Well, but when you're talking about some of our genetics, potentially losing it, when you're talking about money, yeah, we're not suggesting we clone goats today or tomorrow, but at least we know we can have very quickly and economically the DNA stored. Yeah. And hopefully our other breeding programs take and work, but this is, cloning is sort of this last ditch, end of the world type of a, but it's not. It is. It's just amazing.
I think it's great as a research library. The genetic material that's collected over time, you wind up with a longitudinal study capability of that genetic material. So I'm completely in agreement with that. I just I've watched too many dystopian sci-fi.
I know.
Zombie movies.
See, so you were there with me when they were like, "Oh, we're reproducing mammoths," and I'm like, "No, we do not." Like, have you not seen Jurassic Park?
Go for it. Yes. do that. And let's get all those viruses out of the ice in the Antarctica. Yeah.
Exactly. But no, I mean, there was just, it was an interesting, the meeting was just great. Now I'm envisioning San Clemente's with fangs and red beady eyes. Thanks, George. I won't sleep tonight.
This is why you don't invite me to meetings like that. Because I cannot keep a straight face.
I know. Oh. No. I mean, but there's potential for, you know, the goats and I think especially because we currently have a lot of breeders who are hesitant to use their goats, whether it be for meat or dairy. They're still, you know, pure sort of conservationists. And so I think some of the potential of, you know, almost for lack of a better term at the moment, a stud farm where they could, you know, make a profit and, you know, with high quality San Clemente's. It's an interesting concept and something that I think, you know, will definitely be explored moving forward.
Well, I think that's where Erin's impressive, is you're utilizing these animals. You're putting them to work. You've reached a level where you're not just trying to keep them contained and propagate them, but because you've been using them as mowers and dairy and everything else. Oh, we're losing Erin.
Oh, there she is.
There.
Yeah. No, I mean, I always have to go back to, like, Sarah started raising these goats in 2008, I believe. Correct, Sarah?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then I started raising them in 2013. So even in 2013, there was, from what I knew of, around 400 or 450 of these goats. And me being able just to get my hands on a couple was a big deal. And thinking, not that I was opposed to eating them, but, like, even then it was just, like, purely, like, I need to grow a population. A population needs to grow. Now we're absolutely at this, like, the population has definitely grown of this breed, and it is just like, yeah, they're goats. Like, what do we use goats for? Like, they're livestock. They're for a lot of different reasons, and just being able to, like, embrace that spectrum of, like, why are we raising these goats is really important to, like, keep in our head, even if you don't want to eat them or whatever, but we can still do line breeding, we can still do conservation breeding, we can do beaver tourism. There's so much that these goats can offer besides just, like, you know, keeping them in the woods somewhere where they're feral, like, you know, which is fine too. If people want to do that, great. But, like, well, we also need to think about how we're setting things up for people in the future. I think it's what we always need to think about. Like, is my herd of feral San Clemente goats going to be helpful to somebody else in the future? You know, or is it going to make somebody sad?
And I think that's the place to get to. I think, you know, and Sarah, I'm sorry, I might be picking on Erin a little bit because I only know, you know, I see a little more of her work, but I think that's a goal that I have, is to see what can these animals do, where can they go.
Well, definitely. I think, I mean, we had a conversation, Erin and I, about 2 weeks ago, and I've seen in my years that at times breeders are almost like turnkey, that they're really excited about the breed, but they treat them like pets. And just like somebody can't afford to have 10 or 20 dogs, they can't really afford to have 10 or 20 pet goats that aren't doing something, and they burn out. And, you know, finances get tough, or they come across some sort of family situation, and all of a sudden somebody who had the potential to be a really great long-term breeder, if they had found a use for their goat, is gone. And I think that's what we want to prevent. We've also seen breeders who have put in this time and effort to learn about goats and to raise really great herds and the infrastructure. And because they didn't know how to use San Clemente's, have gotten rid of their San Clemente's and turned them in for a traditional dairy or meat breed, where they are much more comfortable and confident that they can recoup some costs or make some profits. And we want to avoid that. We want, people to come, breed, and stay. And giving them a use is how you do that.
But there has to be a period, and we've accepted that. We've got miniature silky fainters, and we've accepted that there's going to be a period of time when it's like you're planting the seed, but instead of several months, you're looking at several years where you're going to have to get to a critical mass. And that's where I think you and Aaron have gotten to, is you've hit a critical mass where it's like, okay, I got so many of these things, I got to put them to work. And right now, even with my miniature silkies, I can't put them to work yet. Last year I had like 4 that I could sell, that I was willing to sell, out of 9 that we kidded. And it's just, you don't have enough. You've got to retain a lot in order to keep that breeding stock, because you've got to hit that critical mass. So that's where I'm, as a new breeder, I'm thinking, I've got a lot of years of just, I got to hold on to what I got. I might let go of a buck here or there, weather it or something, but I don't have a lot of does. I'm not going to let go of any does even in myotonics anytime soon, because I just don't have a critical mass.
That's true. I think one thing we do here is we sort of look at the overall value. So obviously, there's physical money coming in from our dairy and our meat and stuff like that. But, we look at things we've saved. So, for example, we have a market garden. Well, we haven't had to purchase any form of fertilizer in over 15 years, and so we assign a value to our goats that we deduct from their costs. We haven't mowed or done any weed eating in the 14 years we've been here, and that's because of goats and sheep and stuff and different things. And so again, we assign that a value, and we deduct that from our costs. And so, yeah, that's true. We used the goats to clear our property. In fact, the neighbor's like, "Oh, you're gonna have to bring in chemicals or burn it or something." We're like, nope, we own goats, and and that's exactly how it worked. And so I do think sometimes people need to think about that too in trying to recoup money, or, even if it's your own personal usage, like for dairy. Well, how much, if you had to, it varies of course from area, but here a gallon of raw goat's milk goes for $20. So, our family, there's $20 that we deduct from, again, the cost for every gallon that we personally use. And we do keep track of those sorts of numbers for all of our animals, not just our goats, because you quickly start to see a sort of a profit, an even greater profit. And when you deduct those sort of odd numbers, and I don't know how to explain it any better, but it's worked well for us.
Talking about Sarah too, that was just like, I don't have to buy milk anymore. And I think about what the cost for grain, like per goat, and how that offshoots buying milk or whatever. So,
definitely.
Aaron, are you using who's using grain versus who's using just hay?
I've cut back on grain, but it's still just like, just because of my hay test, and I'm not able to get a hold of higher protein hay, I still use stress tubs in the winter time. In my lactating, or like my does after they kid, they get grain once a day on top of that, and then for the goats that I'm hand milking, they get grain as well throughout the summer. So there's some does that I don't hand milk, and they'll stop getting grain after a while. But those other does, I'll still grain.
Yeah, we don't use grain. We use alfalfa on the milk stand, along with a combination of other stuff we grow. So depending on the doe, depending on their condition, they may get some sunflower heads, or a slice of squash or pumpkin or something like that. But yeah, we don't buy in feed.
I was actually, the people that I'm renting that, they started growing black oil sunflower seeds on a bigger scale, and they're growing that this year, and I didn't know that. So I was pretty excited to think about black oil sunflower seeds that were grown locally that I can get my hands on for the goats and start supplementing that a little bit more in their feed.
Yeah, it makes a massive difference, because if you have to buy, if anybody buys in, or if you've even priced 50-pound bags of Boss, it is freaking expensive. So yeah, we grow it, and we just put up the heads, we dry them, and we don't even necessarily per se harvest them. We just, over buckets, we just break heads apart, and we'll toss in part of a head, and they eat it all, and whatever falls into the bucket then can be, tossed in later. But we're pretty simple here.
We do the same with apples. We have a good apple harvest every year, and we just let them freeze in the barn, and then this time of year, they are a treat. Even the most skittish will come up to grab those. Aaron, you were saying something, but you cut out.
Oh, I do that with winter squash as well. I just grow a bunch of it and let it freeze over the winter, and they get frozen winter squash. Or right now, it's gone already, but yeah, it's it. Yeah. I love growing an excess of winter squash and pumpkins for the goats. It's great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was surprised how well it keeps. Just throw it in a bucket and let it freeze, and
yep,
it's okay.
The only issue I've found, though, is that it's attracting rodents where I might have it. If I don't have it securely put away, some kind of rodent will get in there and eat a lot of it, which is, yeah. Mm. But I'm actually going to piece out pretty quick, but there was something, too, I just wanted to really quickly end with, was it was even something talking with the zoo, but we were talking about finding these purposes and uses for the San Clemente goats. And it's, again, I do think it's important to, think about meat and milk and everything else, but, also being really, really creative. I was talking to a woman about, we were just talking about how they're still kind of feral and they're not that friendly. If you were a breeder that was just I'm going to focus on making these baby goats friendly and using them for, things like pat goats or things like therapy goats or things where you need friendly goats. And I was thinking about that with the Miller Park Zoo as well. If they have, since these goats are so hands-on, people are petting these goats all the time, can they be sold to places that they have there's so many different ways that you can use these animals, including being put into browse and goat clearing services. I'm thinking about this, somebody dealing with a bunch of feral San Clemente goats and trying to adapt them into a goat grazing service where they have to get used to being handled and loaded and dropped off at places. If you trained in a herd of goats that are ready to clear for somebody and you sold goats by the herd, again, after you've grown your herd, but you have these amazingly well-behaved goats that you can sell as a herd to a goat clearing service. Because there's so many different avenues,
Well, to that, I think the market, and this is where we get a real disconnect. We've got the Facebook group who's interested in the bottle fed. They have 2 or 4 goats, and they're 5 yards, quasi-suburban. you know, and that's actually where we're kind of interested in, because we're doing fainters right now, and we're not interested in the folks that are, I want one goat. No, you're not going to get one goat. You know, you've got to be somewhat serious about this, but is there a market for goats as pets? And I might be hitting a heresy trigger here, so I apologize for that. But I think as the population expands into this quasi suburban, and this might be Aaron and Aaron, our area where, you know, we're looking at Twin Cities and expansion and people getting 5-10 acres, and they can handle but they don't want a horse. Maybe they're looking at a mini, right? Maybe they're looking at goats. And where are we in the goat world marketing that? And can we do that ethically?
Yeah, there's nothing heretical about pet. I think like the pet goat is still on the wide spectrum of things, and I think it's just like, where are you as a breeder supplying pet goats, and how do you, you know, it's just like with selling any animal, like anything. It's like, what kind of home are they going to? But then also like thinking about this other stuff too, like if there are people interested in like line preservation, like am I just breeding goats that, you know, can go and like do their own thing, and I don't have to worry about losing genetic value to somebody that this is going to have some pet backyard goats? Because I think that's a huge market, but it's just like finding the right fit for those people. And I think there are breeders that can totally breed those right fit goats. And the same with like agritourism or whatever else. It's like, can we, you know, I think that it could be a huge market. Like we have people moving on into more rural places. So
yeah, I think that's where, you know, as a breeding organization, we can look to models like AKC who have set standards for the breeders, because we've got issues like I'm not going to touch an animal from a breeder who hasn't done regular biosecurity scans, right? But backyard breeders on Facebook, I mean, you can go out there and buy goats for dirt cheap, but they don't know what a Yoni's test is, you know. And I think that's where we need to set ourselves apart if we're going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, it's so because people are like, oh my God, why is my goat wasting away? Like, and I mean, there's like, let's say you're a San Clemente breeder that is focusing on the pet market, but your niche is just like education. Like you're there for you're there for that person that bought from you for the rest of the goat's life. Like you kind of have this like superior services, and you educate that person so much. Like I have talked so many people out of getting goats. Like I have not because I'm mean or anything, but I'm like, well, do you know about this? Do you like blah 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 blah? And they're like, God, I'm not ready for goats. I'm like, good. You should be ready for goats. You know, and I don't mean it in a mean way at all, but they're like, yeah, that's a lot more work than what I thought. And so I think there's totally that market of this being the superior, like amazing San Clemente Island goat pet breeder. You know.
Yeah.
I also think though you have to be realistic and have plan Bs. We, you know, we do have a breeder that was attempting to run her herd more like a rescue. So she will only adopt out goats if she can do a home visit. So one, that means nobody outside of a 2-hour radius, because they have to be able to go and visit. But yet the education's not really there. And so a lot of goats are being returned because they don't have proper fencing, or they didn't realize goats could jump fences and stuff like that. So, and now, you know, they're basically now getting rid of their herd because they didn't have a plan B.
I think that plan B is, like, I think about that with, like, dog breeders. I was talking to my vet about a lady that has been breeding golden doodles, and I kind of got, like, the nitty-gritty. She's just like, oh, you know, the vet's just like, I don't like her breeding stuff or whatever. And I'm like, God, what do you do when you can't sell puppies anymore? Like, how many puppies can you sell? I think
a
about
lot.
this. Yeah, I guess so.
There's no end to that. Puppy mill.
I think about that with goats all the time too. I'm like, how many can I really sell X amount every year? Because I've had some years where I've had nobody buy from me, and I'm like, oh, that I have to reframe my budget now, you know, because I was kind of relying on some of those sales, and I'm like, there's no takers.
Aaron, call me.
Oh yeah. I had a bumper crop, and I was like, oh, like I was just remember like nobody's buying. That's cool. But yeah, like, you know, my plan B is always just like I took boys into butcher and this kept the females back, you know, or like even send some females into butcher that I felt like, you know, that hadn't been bred or they weren't some other issues with them or whatever. But yeah, always a plan B, because yeah, they're not puppies. I don't know.
No, they're not. Exactly,
but they're becoming puppies. I think the interest in goats, and you see this in the Facebook groups, is there's and the demographic. I'm in the North Branch area, and in Minnesota, right? So you guys know it's booming. And everything is 5 to 10 acres. And all these people are, you know, wanting to live that country life. You know, so there's a little bit of aspirational opportunity here if we can do it ethically.
I think that's such a huge thing too, because it's also instilling in people, like, let's say you're going to be a pet breeder, but you do so much education. I also get worried about vet care. Like,
yeah,
my rural vet is just straight up. They're like, you are not going to have a rural vet that takes big animals when I retire. And I'm just like, oh shit. You know, like, we talk about this as a farming group a lot. We can't get vet care, so what's going to happen to, like, you know, there's all these scenarios. So if you're selling pet goats to people that have like 1 or 5 acres, and then their vet leaves, like, and they've been reliant 100% almost on a vet, like that's all part of that education thing. Because again, they're not a small animal pet. Like, there's more small animal vets out there than there are large animal vets. So are small animal vets going to start like taking on pet goats? Like, I just don't know. There's like all of these.
We just had a friend of ours who is a small pet vet tech come out and spend the weekend doing blood draws on our goats to get used to it. And I think she'll need a couple of weeks to recover, but you know, she was not prepared for for that. But you know, we're really trying to we're building our own lab to, you know, at least do fecal egg counts and, you know, that kind of thing. And we're not going to try to be a vet, certainly. You know, the scope of practice, but, you know, can we at least be to where we can help each other out with stuff that doesn't require, you know, a license to do.
And I think that this does kind of like tie back into like kidding. Like, are we prepared to deal with crazy situations? And I think this also ties back into like this pet goat thing too. Is just like I'm trying to articulate this nicely. So let's say you're in a suburban 1 acre place that has goats, and you need a vet to come out because like somebody broke a leg and you can't fix it, and you can't get a vet like are you going to get like animal control called on you? Like there's some, like when you're, it's kind of like that thing of like pet and livestock, like these lines blurring, and are you going to be okay with shooting your goat in your 1 acre backyard, like suburban backyard, kind of thing, because you can't get a vet out there. There's all these like scenarios like that. I've had to shoot a goat before because of this. This was a long time ago. I ate it, but like I was okay with that because I had acreage around here. I mean, I've shot many. I should say I've shot enough goats for my own consumption, but I had to put somebody out of their agony. But like, how is somebody going to deal with these real situations as a pet goat owner in a suburban place? Like, if you have a dead goat, how do you deal with it?
Right. And I think that's where we as reputable breeders, or want to be reputable breeders, not like you. So thank you. So how do we set standards in the way that AKC has done for the dog industry? I think there's just a lot of carryover there, and it's a niche. We always talk about dairy, we talk about meat, and now more and more we're talking about clearing, mowing, but we always avoid that topic of goats as pets, and yet Facebook is awash with garbage about, and that's where if you want goats as pets, all you have is the garbage on Facebook. We don't have breeder associations in the way that AKC does that address that issue.
It would be something so worth, because it's going to take a lot of addressing and talking about. I totally hear where you're coming from with that better now, and I don't know if there's a full, like, I don't have like a full answer to somebody's dilemma. I think that's the hard part, right? Like, where my dog broke its leg, just take it to the vet. My goat broke its leg, there isn't a big animal vet.
Right, right.
So that's where I'm getting at, is like, it's not as like clear cut as a dog or a cat. A goat is kind of not quite. So it is. I think it's super worth a lot more discussing and talking about scenarios that people need to deal with, as like if you're having goats as pets, puppers.
So, and there's also like USDA logistics, because if you specifically set yourself up and market as a pet seller, there are certain permits and stuff that you have to meet with the USDA.
Yeah.
And so, and again, as we said too, some of the regulations, I think a lot of people avoid it because of the regulations, and also too because once you call something a pet, i.e. a companion animal, the laws governing it versus, like here in Virginia, in some jurisdictions, you can't put down your own dog if it's ill. That's considered animal cruelty. Even if it's a quick, humane shot. Is that true in
Minnesota?
Oh, I don't know.
Sorry, what?
Minnesota is awful. If you kill a cat for any reason, it is like it's a felony, I think. In Minnesota, if you kill a cat.
Same here in Virginia. So exactly. So I think you're right. Some of it is blurry. If we start calling them pets, what laws do or don't apply to them, and how do you navigate that with potential buyers? So there are,
that's interesting. I'm going to have to talk to my attorney about that, because we're selling as pets, and we dodged that tax-wise because we sell to folks as breeder animals.
Okay. Yep.
So, and the only reason is because we have to charge taxes on pets. But I just ask, do you think you might, is it intact? Yes. Okay. Are you going to maybe make another one? Okay. Then you're a breeder. And so then we can, dodge the tax thing. But that's interesting about the are we recording this?
We are. Should I not?
No! Scratch that!
I'll edit this part out. Well, thank you, everybody, for attending this. And if anybody wants to get a hold of his name is George. No.
Yes, and his address is. No, but this really, we're way off kidding, and we're like an hour over time. But this is really of interest to me because we have that market here, and most of what I've sold, the vast majority of what I've sold is breeder stock. And it's essentially to folks with small acreage who have some livestock experience, and I usually do an interview to, okay, do you know what to do, and if you ever had, ruminants before, and we stay in touch. But I think this might be in terms, especially for goat breeders, help me out here, folks, but setting some ethical standard for this area of this market share. I don't know that livestock folks have really set those kind of standards in the way that animal or dog breeders have.
I can't think of anyone or any group off the top of my head. So it definitely is something interesting to think about and to explore.
I think this is worth a lot more discussion and this information sharing. This kind of have a better understanding, because there's definitely people that are throwing diapers on animals that were always considered livestock and breeding, mini cows. And granted, I think those are great for small acreages, but also I'm seeing people selling mini cows for $10,000. You're not. I'm sorry, but you're not going to be eating those cows. You're gonna sell them. You're gonna breed them and sell them as pets again. And there's this I think there needs to be a little bit more honesty with some of the breeds that we're breeding too. Some breeders get offended by their mini cows being known as pets, but it is just it's called fluffy face farms. What do you? Sorry. These are livestock animals for $15,000.
Clearly, those are folks that are trying to get a farm exemption for taxes.
Right, but they get offended by them being called pets, but they're clearly not being bred for meat. I don't know. It's just yeah, I think there should be. I think that discussion is well worth more looking into, and what that does too for can we be on a happy level playing ground having pet goats and those pet goat owners being okay with the same breed being used as meat and milk too, because that's also I'm always worried about this which is still here today of a divisiveness of this you can't eat your pet, kind of thing. And
but that's going to be anywhere. That's going to be anywhere in this world, because I'm doing Tennessee Fainters, myotonics, and they're great meat goats.
Yeah.
They're fantastic meat goats, but they're so cute. They're so darn cute, right?
Oh, yeah, totally.
And they are.
I just like the notion of the one goat rental group on Facebook I'm part of is very clear of just some people just let their goats die on a job or they shoot them, and some people are just some of the goats that they use for clearing are their pet goats, and they would never do something, but they have they have the one thing in common, which is goat clearing, and everybody gets together, even though they all have a rainbow of like management tactics. They don't argue about like those ethics with it or who does what. Anyways, all right, I'm gonna go say hi to my mom and probably go to bed.
Wait, Mom, Airbnb? What? Huh?
Yeah, me and my mom right down to the zoo at an Airbnb.
Oh, okay. Your mom went with you. That's awesome.
I drag her along to these things maybe more than what she likes.
Safe travels,
Aaron. Call me. I want to nail this all down. So I know you're busy.
I will after, like, the review thing was quite the kerfluffle, but it's almost done, so I'll get a hold of you early next week.
I know. I'm patient, so you do what you got to do. Take care. Safe travels.
Night.
And then there were three.
I know. I should probably go make dinner.
What is that above you? Is that like a moose or something? Okay, it's a deer. Yeah.
A deer.
Okay.
It's my, let's see. Oh, it's my box that I got with my bow, actually.
Oh, hey, cool.
Very cool. So, well,
I've been going for 10 years. 20 years.
Well, I think it was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much, George, for leading it. Next month, we're going to talk youth services. Aaron's leading. No.
Hey.
Hopefully he'll come and talk at least and contribute.
I'll be here.
Awesome. So, well, thank you guys so much. It was so good to see you. So,
thank you, folks.
Have a great night, everybody. See you.
Bye.